PSTN, publicly switched telephone network. That's literally the wires that connect us all, that are used for typically phone call, but also internet these days, with DSL being overlaid on top of the analog circuits. But it encompasses the network that connects all of us: mobile phone networks, analog home phones, ISDN networks. Typically you wouldn't talk about the last mile between an IP-enabled organisation and the internet as being the PSTN, even though in many instances it might be. It might be an analog circuit, it might be an ISDN circuit, it could be anything. But I wouldn't really deem, a leased line over which you're sending IP packets to be part of the PSTN. It's not public. It's also not a switched network, it's an IP network that's packetized. So the PSTN is simply that voice network that the whole world is connected by, that enables us to slice the world up by phone number and say, if it starts +44, it's the UK, and that's true from dialing from anywhere in the world. So there's a logical set of rules that underpins the PSTN, and that's what makes it useful. The analogy would be IP addresses for the internet. They're divided into zones for different ISPs and different countries, and you know how to route from one place in the world to another because there is a standard by which to do it that exists. The same is true for the phone network, the PSTN, and that's existed way before the internet, of course. So we had transatlantic telephone calls, and anyone in this country, even 20 years ago, could ring anywhere in the world, because we all understand that there's an area code, there's a country code, there's a phone number, a subscriber number after that, and as long as you know those details, you can connect a call to anywhere in the world without having to worry about, are they the same standard, do they use the same service? Unlike something like Skype, which is a closed network. You don't have people running a Skype compatible service. Well, who knows, in the next few years that might change, but Skype by design is a closed system, so that you don't have automatic interoperation with a random other service. It would be nice if everything interoperated with each other, but people have goals that aren't the same as the customer. They want to own those particular eyeballs or ears so that they can sell things to them and lock them into a platform. The phone network's the opposite, it's open. The internet's the opposite, it's open. Now, all of that is to some degree true. There are things that people are trying to do to make them not as open as people would like them to be. In our particular industry, for phone, we have some barriers to true openness, one of them being call charging. Not only is call charging completely arbitrary in the first place, it doesn't cost money to connect a specific call. We're allocating a value to that because someone is willing to pay for that. Phone numbers themselves, perhaps, at first a convenience of how do we address individuals across this massive diverse network, but I think at the stage we're at now, the number is really a way to capture somebody for billing. We use that destination number to work out how much to charge somebody, irrelevant of what the actual cost of doing so is. We're using it to apply cost to an action instead of where the cost actually lies, building and maintaining a network. There's no real reason why the traffic on that network should be allocated to specific actions on the network. But that's the model that we've arrived at. Who knows what will happen in the future? We seem to be driving in the direction of call costs being such a small proportion of the service that you're charging for that we're going to arrive somewhere where why even charge for calls? Unlimited access, as people expect with the way they eat data on the internet. And we will probably arrive there sooner than we think, primarily because of the cost of billing. Rating and billing in the telecoms industry is by far the most costly component after you've considered staff. But you could also say a lot of those staff are only involved because there's such a thing as billing. Once you have billing for a customer, you have queries for a customer. You have errors for a customer. So use the numbering to regulate who can and can't provide services. So if we know that the UK issues +44 numbers and the French don't, well, now you have a monopoly on UK. If we use the country code as a way to designate a barrier to entry into that market, BT don't want to have to do business with SFR or whoever it might be in France, so they can impose an ingress charge, a tax, a trade barrier, a tariff on stopping people calling in or out, because, well, if they want the privilege of doing so and you have the monopoly on the number range, why not charge a tax on it? So this is more and more disappearing, but in the 80s it was a massive issue. International calling was dramatically expensive. Thanks to internet and IP and things like that, people expect international calls not to be as ridiculously priced. They don't expect to pay £1 a minute to call France anymore. But there still is a differential in cost for not necessarily a good reason. If two networks have to interoperate, there's a cost of doing that, but there's also a benefit to both parties. At the moment, they've been playing that game of, I know there's a small captive audience who want to cross our borders to make a phone call, charge them the earth. And it's recent that we've had this regulation from government, one of the only positive things from EU, I would say, about roaming charges. They will be abolished. I think 2017 it starts to disappear completely. And then the fun starts. You can imagine what happens when a telecoms company from a very low-cost market, Romania for instance, if they're still part of the EU by then, you can imagine if they have a mobile phone plan, unlimited calling for €10 a month, how will Vodafone and O2 in the UK compete with that if we could just hop on a plane or go on their website and order a SIM card?
Yeah.
If there's no roaming charge, why would we pay UK prices?
Makes everything a bit more competitive for us.
Yeah, I'm getting out of my contract now in 2018.
Yeah, well, not just competitive for the end user, you've got to think about the long-term implication. If you now cannot charge £30 odd a month for a phone service, you can't afford to do some of the things they currently do in terms of sales and marketing, in terms of operations, in terms of staffing levels. If the reason that the Romanian operator in this example can offer it for £10 is because the cost of the same member of staff in Romania is a third of the price. They also don't have an ageing PSTN to contend with, where the cost of wholesale traffic across it is quite high. They've got a new thing because 20 years ago they had nothing. So mobile is first. Here, mobile is a secondary to fixed. So will it drive innovation and investment, or will it make it dry up entirely because we now can't afford to compete? Does that mean we will now offshore all of the services that underpin these networks to a foreign country? Excuse me. There's lots of odd things that might happen from that I don't think the EU regulators have bothered to investigate. I don't think they care. I think they think that the end user price is more important than disruption to an industry, and whether you destroy an industry potentially. As far as I'm concerned, disruption to the industry we're in is a good thing. We're not in the position of being the incumbent who will be harmed by that, but who knows, maybe it will mean that certain services become more or less valuable than others because everything's a race to the bottom.